Hi there and welcome to Scrap and Coffee. It's time for a new project, and as you can see I've really missed the acetate in our previous project, so I'm going crazy on the acetate in this one. We are going to make a chipboard covered mini album with pages that measure 6¼ by 6¼ so they are going to be perfect for your 6x4 photos. So I'm going to construct a page in this video, and there will be a second video where I will give you some other opportunities. So we start with piece A and B, and piece B has two score lines, and you place your tape on the dented side and you're going to fold towards your bumpy side, and this is going to make your tunnel page or your binding page, however you want to call it. So we are going to place it on top of piece A, lining one of the edges of piece B up with one of the edges of piece A. And piece A is a square piece, so it doesn't really matter on what side you do it at this point. So for this album I'm going to make 4 pages, and all the pages will have the same construction, same pieces, although I'm going to play around with some acetate options, leaving some elements out. So for me every page has a different look eventually. So I'm lining it up, and I think my A piece from this page was a little off, so I had a little bit of trouble getting it nicely lined up, so I choose to go for another side, and then it did work. So, but I also noticed it with putting it on the hinge that it was just a hair off. So I guess there was something not completely right with or my A or my B piece, but eventually it all worked out for me. But it took me a little longer than normal. So this is the first construction. And like always, there will be a cutting guide available, but I'm still finishing up the last pieces of this album, so as soon as that's done I will place it on the website, scrapandcoffee.com. So now we are going to attach piece C, and piece C has 2 score lines. It has a little gusset 1/8 inch, and you place your tape on the bumpy side for this piece. And you can fold on both your score lines. So again, getting that 1/8 inch gusset can be a little bit difficult, but I just like the look that I get from it in the end better than when it's all getting too bulky. So I just take that effort. So your tape is on the bumpy side and will be on the inside once you fold it, and you're going to attach it on your B piece on the binding side. So it's going in between piece A and B. And again, like always, when you slide it in there, make sure you're still able to see your score line so it folds over nicely. So try to line everything up and then give it a good burnish. And this is actually the base. The pages are not going to have a lot of flips and things, so that's why I did 4 pages. But I think I made it interesting enough for it to have a lot of photo opportunity and some fun features. So now we are going to work on our A side, and first I've got a piece D, and I'm going to taper the 1/2 inch flap so it has 2 score lines, one at 1/2 inch and one somewhere in the middle. I don't know the measurements from my head. You scored it at 5 and 5/8 of an inch. So we're going to make it a little tri-fold. So you're going to fold the 5 5/8 inch score line towards the dented side. So you have the little tri-fold that I will show you in a sec. So just like that, that's how you want it. And we are going to attach it on top of piece A, but actually before we attach it, we're first going to attach 2 other pieces to make sure that we line everything up nicely. So here I'm using piece E and piece F, and I do have both measurements in the cutting guide, but eventually I end up using 2 E pieces on every page, and I will show you in a minute. You will see why I did that. So our pieces E and F are our flaps, and both have 2 score lines. Again, a gusset of 1/8 inch, and I've placed my tape on the dented side. So we can fold on all those score lines on both pieces. Making sure everything is nice and straight. And then on top of these pieces we are going to place a little belly band, and that are your pieces G. And we are going to place 1 on each of these flaps. And for that we are going to measure where we want them. So in order to place them, you are going to fold on your second score line, so your gusset is lying underneath you. And I'm going to make a pencil mark on where I want my belly band. And I measure it because I'm going to place an extra piece, and when you place it on the measurements that I'm telling you, you will have it nicely lined up at the end. So I'm going to make a pencil mark 1 1/4 from the folded edge. And I just do that on both sides so I know it's straight. And then you will have your belly band 1 1/4 from your folded edge, so you're going to place it on the right side of your pencil mark. And I'm just using my ruler here. It's also a technique you can use instead of the pencil mark. So, and then again I'm just using the ruler in order to get it straight. So if you use 2 pieces E, then you will do exactly the same thing. You will do exactly the same measurements, but you just have 2 shorter pieces. So for piece F, I'm going to do the same thing that I did for piece E. I'm going to place the belly band 1 1/4 from the folded over edge. So for the tape for the belly bands are also on the dented side, and you fold towards the bumpy side. That's mainly the standard rule that I'm going for. So if I don't tell you where the tape goes or which side you're going to fold towards, then it's always tape on the dented side and you fold towards the bumpy side, unless I tell you otherwise. So here I'm just using the ruler 1 1/4. Try to get it nice and straight. And there we go. So now these pieces are going on top of piece A, and I choose to place the piece E, the shorter one, on the bottom, and piece F, the longer one, on top. So if you do want to have the 2 different sizes, You could also turn them around, because you will see that there is a little overlapping, and with what I want to do with it, it's the overlapping is too much. Yeah, I will show you. It's a little bit hard to explain for me by just saying it, but we're going to place these on piece A, and we're going to center them on the page. And in order to center them, you are going to place them 1 inch from your edge. So I made a pencil mark 1 inch from the left side, and I just line it up with the bottom, and then I turn it around because it's easier for me. And now I'm placing the F piece also. I'm making again a mark 1 inch, but mostly I will look if they line up together, because that's what you want. So I'm just going for the pencil mark, but I mostly look if they will be lining up. And just line it up with your top edge, of course. And for attaching them, you fold on your 1/2 inch score line, by the way. So you will see your gusset at this point. And here I forgot that I didn't remove the tape backing completely, so there we go. Now it's stuck down. And I noticed that I wanted to have the top flap lying over the bottom flap, but then it will go over the belly band on the bottom. So that didn't work, so I had to place the bottom flap over the top flap. But then when you want to shove like a photo mat behind the belly bands, you will bump up against that bottom flap. And because of that, I decided to go with 2 shorter sides, so 2 E pieces. So now we are going to attach piece D, and piece D is slightly smaller than your page in height, so it should be lining up between your score lines of your E and your F piece. And you are going to attach it on the on the right. No, my left and right are terrible. On the left side of piece A, but you want to stay away about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, because that's your binding side. So I'm just really paying attention to my score lines, because you do want it to be able to fold over like I'm testing right here. So the tape backing removed. So now when we close it, your top flap of your D piece is falling underneath the piece E and F. And now I'm going to make an extra piece, and this is piece H. Piece H is 8 3/8 of an inch by 4 3/4. And with the 8 3/8 inch on top, you're going to score at 1/2 an inch. Then you're going to score at 4 1/4, and then at 7 7/8 of an inch. So 1/2 an inch, 4 1/4, and 7 7/8 of an inch. Then you turn it counterclockwise, that's pretty important, and you score at 1/2 an inch. Now, so I've turned the piece around now, so your score line on the short side is on your right. And the square on your top is a little bit bigger than the square on the bottom. So this now is 3 3/4, and the bottom one is 3 5/8 of an inch. So you want to have it that way, and the dented side is facing up at this point. So we are going to place our tape on the dented side, on the bottom 1/2 inch, and on the 1/2 inch up until the score line in the middle. So then we are going to make a cut, because we don't need everything here. We are going to cut at an angle up to that intersection in the middle. And then I'm turning it over to the bumpy side and I'm cutting away that top ½ inch. So on the longer part. It's only 1/8 of an inch bigger, but it's very important. So, and I didn't do a very good job on my cutting. I was cutting on my score line, and you want to cut the score line away. So I'm recutting here. And luckily that worked and I was able to fix it. So now when I turn it over to the dented side again, you are going to miter on the bottom section, and you are going to taper the other side of that ½ inch on the bottom. So this is what we've got now. So this is the dented side, and now I'm going to turn it over to the bumpy side, and we are going to draw a frame on that smaller part, so where we still have the ½ inches attached. So I'm going to draw a frame 1 inch from the cut edge on the sides with a score line and the ½ inch flap. So on the bottom 1 inch, and here 1 inch from the cut edge. And then I am going ½ inch from the score line in the middle. And half an inch from the cut edge on the side with no score lines. So you draw a ½ inch frame in this piece. And you're going to cut out that center piece, the window that we just draw. So I'm just leaving it, the whole process of making the acetate window in for this piece. And we are going to make a lot of acetate windows on this project, so I'm not going to show you every window from beginning to end completely how I've done it, because the base is the same for every window actually, the process. So just cleaning up the edges. Yep, and then it's out. So what I like to do is, I have a piece of acetate. Measurements for the acetate are all in the cutting guide, but I placed 1/8 inch tape around the perimeter of my acetate, but I also like to do 1/8 of an inch around the perimeter of my cardstock, on the window around my cardstock. It's not completely necessary, it's just my thing of making everything perfect. You could easily go with 1/4 of an inch tape on either the acetate or the cardstock. Both will work perfect. But I just like to be sure that the edge of the acetate is sticking to my cardstock, but also the edge of the window, the cardstock window, is sticking down to my acetate, if you get what I'm trying to say. I don't want anything to be catching or... So when you've placed the tape, you carefully burnish it, especially on the acetate. Be very careful, because you can damage the acetate. And then you just remove the tape backing from both your cardstock and your acetate, if you've done it on both. So it's a little, it's taking some time, especially when you do it on two sides. Yeah, it takes a little longer. So when you place your acetate, make sure that you're in between your score lines and there is no overhang of tape. And then when you've placed it, carefully burnish the tape down. And then we can start folding on our score line. So again, we are going to fold towards the bumpy side and burnish. And then the dented side will be the side that we are going to see in our end result. So that's the bumpy side is going to be our ugly side, and we won't see it when everything is done. So we are scoring on our 1/2 inch flaps, and then when we fold this over to the top, you will notice that you have 1/8 of an inch between your pocket and your top score line. And that's what we want. I wanted to make sure that you could flip this very neatly and lay it flat, and that there weren't any problems with that. So that's why I gave you that 1/8 of an inch room on top. So we burnish everything down, and now we have to place tape. So we are going to do this, let me think, on the dented side. But we're also going to fold towards the dented side for this score line. So the tape will be on the inside of your flap. So fold towards the dented side for that last score line. And then when we get our page back in, we are going to attach this flap behind the belly band of your top flap. So we are going to place it right behind there. And again, when you stick it down, make sure that you're able to see your score line so it can fold over that belly band. So I'm just sliding it behind there and stick it down. And then I am going to use a magnet to keep that flap shut. So I'm going to place a magnet on the bottom belly band and on the flap. So there go magnets. So you do have to be careful because your belly band is only like 3/4 of an inch. And your magnets are, I'm not sure, these magnets are a little under 1/2 inch, I think. So yeah, look at the size of your magnets. If your magnets are a little bit bigger, then you might want to make your belly band a little bit bigger as well, because otherwise you're not able to cover it up nicely with your pattern paper. So that's something to think about. So make sure that my gussets are standing up here from piece E and F. That's very important. And then you can place your magnets. And I always cover my magnets up with some double-sided tape when I've placed them. So I know that they're staying in place, but also I can separate them pretty easy without ripping any cardstock or anything. So that's the front of the first page. Now we are opening it up, and then we going to work with piece I. And again, for this page I'm making a window in piece I. It's the closure for your pocket. We have tape on the dented side and one score line, and we are going to make some pencil marks. On the bottom you're going to make a pencil mark 2 1/4 from your inwards. So from your right corner and from your left corner you're going 2 1/4 inwards, and you're going 1 3/4 down from your score line. So you start measuring at your score line and then you go 1 3/4 on both sides. So I'm going to cut away. So I'm lining up the ruler with those pencil marks that I've made and cut that angle away. You can use your paper trimmer for this, of course, but I was just like, I'm going to use my knife and ruler. It's just a shortcut, so I'll be fine. And then we are going to draw a frame. So we are going 1/2 inch inwards from every edge, except for so also on the angled edges, the short edges, 1/2 inch from your cut edge, but only on the top. With the score line you're going 1 inch inwards. And then we are going to cut away the inner frame again. So we are going to cut everything, and I always have to clean up my corners because I never make a nice cut at once. And I think my blade was getting a little bit dull here as well, so I had some trouble making nice cuts at once. But there we go. So that's what it should look like when you draw everything and cut it out. Now I will advise you to make a little template for your matting process. So I got a piece of scrap white cardstock, placed my piece on there and just trace it on the inside and the outside. And then of course you have that 1/2 inch on the top where you want to, that's your 1/2 inch to attach it, so you can draw a line 1/2 inch inwards from there and remove that other 1/2 inch because you're not going to need it for your pattern paper. And then also you want to make your pattern paper a little smaller than the frame that you just draw. So I'm going to draw lines, and I can only do 1/8 of an inch with my ruler. So I draw a line 1/8 of an inch inwards from the outside lines, but also from the inside frame. But I ended up cutting in between those lines actually. So yeah, you just have to make it a little smaller than what you traced. So now I have a piece of acetate and I place tape on 3 sides and in the center of the bottom. And I'm going to place it where I will eventually place it on my cardstock. And then I made tick marks on the backing of the tape on where my angles begin. So I know where I can cut the acetate away. So I'm lining up the acetate with those tick marks that I've made on the tape backing and cut that angle on my acetate. And then I can place the tape on the angles on the acetate. And for this piece I'm only placing the tape on my acetate, not on 2 sides. Whatever you do, always for this piece place the tape on your acetate and not on your cardstock. And that's because you're going to try to hide this construction on the inside with your pattern paper. And if you place the tape all the way to the edge of your frame, you will see that in the end, so you don't want that. So you want to have a little edge where there isn't any tape after you place the acetate on there. So that's why I am not placing any tape on my cardstock here. So also use the smallest tape that you have in your stash. erase all the pencil marks that you're still able to see, because this is a flap, so you will be seeing both sides of your cardstock. It's not like with the pocket, when you fold it over you won't see it anymore. So you have to take a little bit more care on how both of your sides will look in the end. So remove the tape backing and carefully place it, because you really want to try to have a little edge of cardstock showing. And this is 1/8 of an inch tape, at least it's sold as 1/8, but it's closer to 3/16 inch. And I also have 1/8 of an inch tape that's really small, and that was actually better if I've used that on this piece, but eventually it worked, so it's fine. But the smaller the tape, the better it is in this case. So I'm tapering the 1/2 inch, then we can fold towards the bumpy side. And then we are going to place it on the back side of piece A. And lining it up with the left edge. So for closures for this pocket, it's a little bit more difficult because of all the acetate. You can use a magnet on the 1/2 inch frame. You can use swing tabs. I eventually placed a belly band on top of piece B on one of the pages. So that's an option. So you can place a photo mat underneath it and it will hold your flap down. So that are all options. But I will show you in the next video different variations of how you can make your B and I piece with the acetate. Now we're going to piece J, and for piece J I gave you a measurement in the cutting guide. I believe it's 7 1/4 by 3 1/4, and it's very important that you cut 7 1/4 a hair shorter, because when you are going to place it on the page, you need it to fit in between the score line and your cut edge. In order to center this piece, and that's what I wanted, I have made a pencil mark 1.5 inch from the top, and that will also give you 1.5 inch from the bottom. But you don't see it here, but I made a little tick mark 1.5 inch from the top, and just making sure that I did it right. And then I will just use my ruler on the other side again, just like I did with the belly bands on the small pieces, to also have it 1.5 inch from the top, or in this case from the right side, but that's actually the top of the page. And hopefully you're able to see here that when I place it, that I place it just up against that score line. And that's because I cut it a hair under that 7 1/4 inch. So that's quite important to do it. So on top of this belly band we are going to place a pocket, and that's your K piece with your tape on the dented side, 3 score lines. And here again we are going to draw that frame. So again 1 inch from the sides with 1 inch from the cut edge with the sides with a score line, and 1/2 inch on the side with no score line. Place your tape, and then we can place that acetate down on that frame. So you do that on the bumpy side. So remove all your tape backing, and then place it in between your score lines, making sure you don't have any overhang. And I always give myself the same amount of space on the edges, and I use the same tape, so I just know by now how to place my acetate. So it looks really easy, but it's just I've got a feeling for where I can lay it down, and I'll be fine. And later on I've started to use the smaller tape, and then I started to struggle with how to place the acetate, so that was pretty funny actually, but how you can get used to certain things. So again, I'm folding all my score lines towards the bumpy side, burnishing it, making sure there is no overlapping, and I'm going to place this on top of the belly band. And I'm going to do that centered again. So I'm going to make a little pencil mark 1 inch from the cut edge on my belly band. Yep, just decided to go with a little pencil mark. It's just the easiest for me to do it like that. And then I removed one side of the tape backing only here, lining it up with that pencil mark, and then bringing it to the top, making sure that my bottom, because actually that's more important to me, you want to have the bottom and the top of your pocket lining up with your belly band, because it would look really weird if that's completely off. So I'm really having my focus on the bottom and the top, and not so much on the side of the pocket. So that's it for this, and then we are going to the back of C, and really easy, we're going to place one pocket, and again I'm just making a acetate window in here. So tape on the dented side, draw your frame on the bumpy side, like I've done with all the pieces, 1 inch from the cut edge on the sides with a score line, and 1/2 inch from the edge without a score line, and cut that out. Place all your tape and place your frame or your acetate on top of your frame. This pocket, I'm going to place it on the bottom. It's really important to make sure that you don't go over your score line. I will show you in a minute, but you can also place it sideways. The page is square, so it will fit in any direction that you want to place it. So I've mitered the corners. I'm folding towards that bumpy side. Again, and just make sure that the flaps don't overlap. If they do overlap, just cut it a little bit further in. So this piece will go here, and you don't want to have any overhang. I'm going to place the page open so it's a little bit flatter, easier to attach. And you just want to make sure that you don't go over that score line on your right hand side. If you do go over, you have to make your pocket a little bit smaller or rescore one of your flaps. So I'm going to start and lining it up with the corner on the cut edge, because you don't want to go over that as well. Lining it up with the bottom, and then place it, and the measurement should provide for it to fit on there, but you never know if you miscut a little bit, or if your scoring line wasn't completely straight. Just make sure that everything fits. And that's the page actually. So we can open this up. We have a little accordion style flap here. Lots of room for your photos. And then all of that closes. You have a large pocket there. And then the belly band with a pocket. And then another pocket on the back. So that's the page. And yeah, keep an eye open for video number 2, where I give you other opportunities on the page. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in that one.